My name is Rachel Thompson, 34, and my world collapsed when I got the call about my father Harold passing away. After the most painful year of my life, watching my husband Ethan leave me for my own mother Diana, I never expected that single phone call would change everything. Grief mixed with a strange anticipation as I prepared to face them both at the funeral. Little did they know what was coming. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever experienced family betrayal and want to see justice served. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in Boston, where success was measured by the square footage of your home and the brand of your car. My father, Harold Mitchell, was a self-made real estate developer who built an empire from the ground up. He worked 80-hour weeks, rarely home for dinner, but always providing us with everything money could buy. Despite his emotional distance, he instilled in me a strong work ethic and determination. My mother Diana, on the other hand, was the socialite of the family. With her perfectly styled hair and designer wardrobe, she attended every charity gala and country club event. Looking back now, I can see how superficial her charm was, how her eyes would constantly assess the value of people and things around her. But as a child, I just wanted her approval, which always seemed just out of reach. Despite growing up with wealth, I was determined to make my own way in the world. After graduating with a business degree, I chose to enter real estate, but on my own terms. I refused my father's offer to join his company and instead worked my way up at a competing agency. Within 5 years, I became one of the top agents in Boston, specializing in luxury properties. It was at a charity auction for children's education that I met Ethan Williams. I was volunteering at the event, and he was there representing his financial advisory firm. Tall with dark hair and confident blue eyes, he approached me with a glass of champagne and a genuine interest in my work. Or so I thought at the time. "I've heard about your success," he said. "Impressive to make such a name for yourself in this competitive market, especially when you could have taken the easy route with your father's company." I was immediately drawn to him. Unlike other men I dated who either wanted access to my family connections or were intimidated by my success, Ethan seemed to appreciate my independence. Our romance was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to Cape Cod, surprise dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants, and long conversations about our dreams and ambitions. 6 months after we met, he proposed on a sailboat in Boston Harbor at sunset. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was everything I had dreamed of as a little girl. We married at the historic Boston Public Library, with 400 guests and a reception that lasted until dawn. Diana took over much of the planning, which should have been my first warning sign, but I was too in love to notice. My father gave a short but meaningful toast, the most emotion I'd ever seen him display publicly. To my daughter Rachel, who has always forged her own path. And to Ethan, welcome to our family. Take care of her. She deserves nothing but happiness. The early days of our marriage were blissful. We bought a brownstone in Beacon Hill, spent weekends renovating it together, and planned for our future. Ethan's financial advisory business was growing, and my real estate career continued to flourish. We discussed having children in a few years after we had established ourselves further. I invited Ethan to our monthly family dinners, eager for him to build relationships with my parents. My father was initially reserved but warmed up when they discovered a shared interest in classic cars. My mother, however, was immediately effusive, complimenting him constantly and touching his arm when she laughed at his jokes. "Your husband is absolutely charming, Rachel," she would say. "So much more sophisticated than those other boys you dated." There were signs I chose to ignore. The way Ethan's eyes would linger on the artwork in my parents' home, asking about their value. His careful questions to my father about investment strategies. The increasing frequency with which he mentioned my potential inheritance. "Your parents must have quite the estate planned," he said one night as we got ready for bed. "Have they talked to you about their will?" I was shocked by the bluntness of his question. "No, and I wouldn't expect them to. That's their business." He backtracked quickly. Of course, I'm just thinking about our future, our security. I believed him because I wanted to, because his touch still gave me butterflies and his smile still made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Because admitting there were problems would mean acknowledging that perhaps I had made a mistake, that perhaps the perfect life I thought I had built was sitting on a foundation of sand. So I pushed down my concerns and focused on our happiness. I threw myself into work, into our home, into building the life I had always envisioned. And for a while, it worked. We were the couple others envied, successful and in love. If only I had known then what was happening behind my back. 3 years into our marriage, subtle shifts began to appear in our relationship. Ethan, once so attentive and loving, started working later hours and became distracted during our conversations. His phone would buzz constantly, and he would step away to take calls in private. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague and dismissive. Just the usual client meetings, nothing interesting, he would say, quickly changing the subject. At the same time, Ethan's interest in my family connections intensified. He began asking more pointed questions about my father's business dealings and investment portfolio. What had once seemed like casual conversation now felt like interrogation. Is your father still investing in that development in Cambridge? What kind of returns is he seeing? Has he considered diversifying into international markets? Even more disturbing was the change in my mother's behavior around Ethan. At family gatherings, Diana would make a point of sitting next to him, laughing too loudly at his jokes and finding excuses to touch his arm or straighten his tie. Her eyes would follow him around the room, and she would mention him constantly in conversation. Ethan was telling me about this fascinating investment opportunity, she would say. Or, Ethan thinks I should redecorate the summer house. He has such exquisite taste. When I confronted her about her flirtatious behavior, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Darling, you're being ridiculous. I'm just being friendly to my son-in-law. Would you rather I treat him coldly? Besides, a little attention never hurt anyone. Men need to feel appreciated. The condescension in her tone made my stomach turn, but I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Diana had always been tactile and effusive with people she liked. Perhaps this was just her way of welcoming Ethan into the family. Around this time, my father began experiencing health problems. What started as shortness of breath and fatigue was diagnosed as a serious heart condition. The doctors recommended a reduced workload and stress management, advice Harold predictably ignored. I built this company from nothing, he said during one of my visits. I can't just step back now. As my father's health declined, Ethan suddenly developed an intense interest in spending time with him. He would offer to drive Harold to doctor's appointments or sit with him in his home office, discussing business strategies and investment opportunities. On the surface, it seemed like the caring actions of a concerned son-in-law, but something about it felt calculated. Your father is a brilliant businessman, Ethan would say. I'm learning so much from him. It's important we spend this time together now, while we can. Despite my unease, I was grateful for Ethan's support during this difficult time. My father seemed to appreciate his company as well, often remarking on Ethan's business acumen and ambition. Meanwhile, Diana began showing up at our home with increasing frequency, always timing her visits for when I was at work, but Ethan was home. She claimed she was dropping off home-cooked meals or family photos, but these visits often lasted hours. One evening, I came home early from a canceled client meeting to find several empty wine glasses in the sink and my mother's distinctive perfume lingering in the air. When I asked Ethan about it, he explained that Diana had stopped by to discuss birthday plans for my father. We lost track of time talking about the party, he said. You know how your mother can be once she gets an idea in her head. The explanation seemed reasonable, but doubt had planted itself firmly in my mind. I began checking Ethan's phone when he was in the shower, finding increasingly frequent text exchanges with Diana. While none were explicitly inappropriate, Their familiar tone and inside jokes made my skin crawl. Diana, that restaurant was divine. We must go back sometime. Ethan, absolutely. The view almost as beautiful as the company. Diana, flatterer. Same time next week? When confronted, Ethan accused me of invading his privacy and insisted he was just building a good relationship with his mother-in-law. Would you rather we didn't get along? He asked, turning the situation around on me. I thought you'd be happy that I make an effort with your family. My anxiety grew as I noticed more red flags. Ethan began criticizing me in ways that echoed my mother's lifelong criticisms: my casual style of dress, my straightforward manner of speaking, my lack of interest in the social climbing that consumed Diana's life. You could make more of an effort, you know, he said one night before a dinner party. Diana always looks so elegant at these events. People notice these things in our circles. The comparison to my mother felt like a slap in the face. I had spent my entire life trying to be different from Diana, whose values had always seemed shallow and materialistic to me. Now my own husband was suggesting I should be more like her. Since when do you care so much about what people in our circles think? I asked. Ethan's response was dismissive. It's important for our future, Rachel. Connections matter in this world. Your mother understands that. That night, watching Ethan and Diana across the dinner table, their heads bent close together in conversation, laughing at private jokes, I felt a chill of realization. Something was very wrong in my marriage, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. The day my world truly shattered began like any other. I was supposed to be showing a waterfront property until late afternoon, but my client canceled at the last minute. Instead of calling Ethan to let him know I'd be home early, I decided to surprise him with lunch from our favorite Italian restaurant. As I turned my key in the lock, I heard voices coming from our living room. Ethan's deep laugh, followed by my mother's distinctive giggle. I froze in the hallway, my hand still on the doorknob. She doesn't understand you like I do, Diana was saying, her voice dropping to that seductive tone I'd heard her use with my father's business associates over the years. Rachel has always been so practical. No romance in her soul. I know, Ethan replied, his voice heavy with what sounded like regret. I thought she would be different, more passionate. More like you. The bag of food slipped from my hand, the sound of containers hitting the floor announcing my presence. When I stepped into the living room, Ethan and Diana sprang apart on the sofa, but not before I saw his hand on her thigh, their faces inches apart. Rachel. My mother recovered first, smoothing her skirt and flashing her practiced society smile. You're home early, darling. Ethan and I were just discussing your father's birthday celebration. Ethan nodded too enthusiastically. Diana had some great ideas for the party. We lost track of time. The pathetic excuse hung in the air between us. I looked from my husband to my mother, taking in their guilty expressions, the wine glasses on the coffee table, Diana's lipstick slightly smudged. Do you think I'm stupid? My voice was eerily calm. Do you really think I haven't noticed what's been happening? Rachel, you're overreacting. Ethan stood, approaching me with his hands raised placatingly. This isn't what it looks like. Then what is it, Ethan? Explain to me why my mother is in our home, again, when I'm supposed to be at work. Explain why you're telling her I'm not passionate enough, not romantic enough. Diana rose gracefully, gathering her designer purse. I should go. You two clearly need to talk. No. I blocked her path to the door. You don't get to walk away from this. How long has it been happening? How long have you been going after my husband? Diana's eyes narrowed, the society mask slipping to reveal the coldness beneath. Don't be dramatic, Rebecca. It doesn't suit you. Her dismissiveness broke something in me. After decades of seeking her approval, of trying to be good enough for her love, I finally saw her clearly for who she was. Still, suspicions and evidence of inappropriate closeness weren't the same as proof of an affair. After this confrontation, both Ethan and Diana were more careful, but my trust was irreparably damaged. I needed to know the truth, one way or another. I installed a small security camera in our living room, disguised as a clock radio. Ethan never noticed it, too preoccupied with his phone and secretive conversations. For a week, nothing happened. Then, on a day I had very publicly announced to my office that I would be at a real estate conference in New York overnight, the camera captured everything I had feared and more. Diana arrived at our home at 7 that evening, dressed in an outfit I recognized as new, carrying an overnight bag. Ethan greeted her with a passionate kiss that made my stomach turn. They drank expensive champagne from our wedding crystal, laughed about their perfect timing, and then proceeded to my bedroom, our bedroom, where the rest of their betrayal unfolded beyond the camera's view, but with enough audio to confirm my worst suspicions. I sat in my hotel room in New York, watching the footage on my laptop, feeling my entire life crumbling around me. The two people who should have loved and protected me had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. I cried until there were no tears left, then sat in numb silence until morning. When I returned home the next day, I confronted them both. I invited Diana over, telling her I needed to discuss my father's care. When she arrived, I connected my laptop to our television and played the footage without a word. The color drained from Ethan's face as he realized what he was watching. Diana, however, merely pursed her lips in annoyance at being caught. "How could you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Both of you. How could you do this to me?" Ethan tried denial first, then blame shifting. "You've been so distant, Rachel. Always working, never making time for us. I was lonely. So you sleep with my mother? That's your solution to feeling neglected." Diana watched our exchange with cool detachment before finally speaking. "Oh, stop with the theatrics, Rachel. These things happen. Men have needs, and frankly, you've never known how to keep one satisfied. You're too much like your father, all work and no passion." Her cruelty stunned me into silence. Ethan, perhaps sensing an ally in Diana, became more forthright. "Diana understands me in ways you never have," he said. "She's sophisticated, elegant. She knows how to make a man feel important." "And you?" I asked my mother. "What's your excuse?" Diana shrugged, examining her manicure. "I've always taken what I wanted, Rachel. You know that. Besides, I've been jealous of your relationship with Harold for years. The way he looks at you with pride when all I get is criticism and distance. Taking Ethan was satisfying." The callousness of her admission left me breathless. This woman, who had given birth to me, felt no remorse for destroying my marriage, my trust, my sense of family. Ethan cleared his throat. "I think it's best if we're honest about the situation. I want a divorce, Rachel. Diana and we have a connection. We want to be together." I looked at the man I had loved, the man I had planned to build a life with, and saw a stranger. "Get out," I whispered. "Both of you, get out of my house now." "It's our house," Ethan had the audacity to say. "And legally. Get out." I screamed, years of pain and betrayal pouring out. "Get out before I call the police and show them this footage. I'm sure the partners at your firm would be very interested to see their trusted financial advisor seducing his mother-in-law." They left, Diana with a backwards glance that held something like triumph, Ethan without meeting my eyes. As the door closed behind them, I sank to the floor, my world completely shattered. The weeks following the confrontation were the darkest of my life. I couldn't bear to stay in the home I had shared with Ethan, where every room held memories now tainted by betrayal. I packed essential belongings and moved into a small apartment in South Boston, far from our Beacon Hill neighborhood and the social circles where news of the scandal was spreading like wildfire. The divorce proceedings were a special kind of humiliation. Ethan hired an aggressive attorney who attempted to claim half of my personal assets, including my business reputation and client list. He argued that his support had been instrumental to my success, despite having nothing to do with my real estate career. In mediation sessions, he would sit across from me with practiced regret on his face while his lawyer made increasingly outrageous demands. Mr. Williams feels entitled to compensation for the significant social connections he brought to the marriage, the lawyer stated in one particularly infuriating session. My own attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Meredith who specialized in high-conflict divorces, leaned forward. Interesting theory. We look forward to discussing those social connections in open court, along with video evidence of Mr. Williams' extramarital activities with his mother-in-law. That threat was enough to make Ethan settle for a more reasonable division of assets, though the process still dragged on for months, draining my energy and finances. Meanwhile, the gossip spread through Boston society like poison. Former friends would fall silent when I entered cafes or stores. Clients began canceling listings, citing personal reasons, but clearly uncomfortable with the scandal attached to my name. My boss called me into his office one afternoon, his expression grave. Rachel, you know I value your work, but this situation, it's affecting the agency's reputation. Perhaps a leave of absence would be best until things settle down. I refused to be pushed out of my career, the one thing I had built entirely on my own. My personal life has nothing to do with my ability to sell properties, I insisted. If you want my resignation, you'll have to fire me outright. He backed down, but my listings dwindled, and I was no longer invited to represent the agency's premium properties. My income decreased by nearly 60% in those months. Most painful was watching Ethan and Diana flaunt their relationship publicly. They appeared together at charity events, Diana on Ethan's arm wearing dresses more appropriate for a woman half her age. They dined at the most visible tables in exclusive restaurants. They took weekend trips to Nantucket, staying at boutique hotels where they were sure to be seen by members of our social circle. My father's health continued to deteriorate during this time. When I visited him at the family home, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished by both illness and the scandal surrounding his wife and son-in-law. Diana had taken to playing the devoted caretaker when others were watching, but I noticed how she would check her phone constantly, texting Ethan when she thought no one was looking. Dad, we need to talk about Mom and Ethan, I said during one visit, bringing him tea in his study. Harold waved his hand dismissively. Not now, Rachel. I'm too tired for drama. This isn't drama, Dad. They're taking advantage of you. Mom is using your illness to position herself and Ethan for financial gain. She doesn't even try to hide their relationship anymore. My father looked at me with tired eyes. What would you have me do? Divorce her after 40 years? Create even more scandal? The doctors say I need to avoid stress. But Dad, enough. His voice rose briefly before he winced in pain. I've built this life, this business, this reputation. I won't have it all end in tabloid headlines. Your mother and I have an understanding. Whatever that understanding was, he refused to elaborate. I left his study feeling frustrated and helpless, knowing that Diana and Ethan were manipulating his vulnerability. As the months passed, I found myself excluded from family events. I learned about my cousin's wedding through social media, seeing pictures of Diana and Ethan attending together while I received no invitation. When I called my aunt to ask why, she was uncomfortably honest. Diana said you were still too emotional about the divorce and that having you there would create tension. We thought it best to avoid conflict. My mother had effectively turned my extended family against me, presenting herself as the reasonable one while painting me as unstable and bitter. The isolation was nearly complete. One evening, while picking up takeout from a restaurant near my father's office building, I overheard Ethan and Diana at a corner table, deep in conversation. I ducked behind a partition, their voices carrying clearly in the quiet restaurant. Harold's doctor says it could be any time now, Diana was saying, her tone inappropriately excited. The will reading will be simple. I've been his wife for 40 years. Everything comes to me, and then we can finally stop sneaking around. Ethan reached for her hand across the table. Have you thought about how you want to invest the capital? The development opportunity in Seaport won't be available forever. First, I want to renovate the entire house. That dreary study of Harold's will make a perfect spa room. And I'm thinking we should spend the summer in Europe. Paris, perhaps, or the Italian coast. They continued planning their future with my father's money, showing no genuine grief for his impending death, no respect for the life he had built. I left the restaurant without my food, sickened by their callousness. That night, I hit my lowest point. Alone in my sparse apartment, surrounded by moving boxes I hadn't bothered to unpack, I gave in to despair. My marriage was over. My career was struggling, my family had chosen my betrayers over me, and my father was dying while being manipulated by the two people I had once trusted most. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until exhaustion finally pulled me into restless sleep. I didn't know then that rock bottom would become the foundation for rebuilding my life, or that the next phone call would change everything. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. My father's night nurse, speaking in hushed tones, informed me that Harold Mitchell had passed peacefully in his sleep. Despite our complicated relationship and the strain of recent months, grief hit me like a physical blow. I sat on the edge of my bed in the darkness, phone still in hand, tears streaming silently down my face. By the time I arrived at the family home, Diana had already taken charge. The foyer was filled with flower arrangements, and a catering company was setting up in the dining room. My mother, dressed immaculately in designer black, was giving instructions to staff while checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Rachel," she acknowledged coolly when she noticed me. "You're here. The funeral home will arrive shortly. I've planned a service for Friday at St. Mark's." Harold's business associates expect nothing less than perfection. No mention of my father as a person, as her husband of 40 years. No shared grief or comfort. Just logistics and appearances. "I'd like to see him," I said, moving toward the stairs. Diana blocked my path. "He's already been prepared for transport. Best to remember him as he was." I later learned she had called the funeral home immediately after his death, before even informing me. Another small cruelty in a long history of them. The funeral was a performance worthy of Diana's theatrical nature. She played the grieving widow flawlessly, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, leaning appropriately on Ethan's arm as he guided her down the aisle. I sat in the front row, physically close to them but separated by an ocean of betrayal. Ethan had the audacity to attempt condolences, approaching me at the reception with practiced sympathy. "Rachel, I'm truly sorry for your loss. Harold was a remarkable man." "Don't," I said, my voice low but firm. "Don't pretend you care. Don't pretend you weren't counting the days until his death. He had the grace to look ashamed, but not enough to leave me alone. Despite everything, I did respect your father. And I've been thinking about us, about everything that happened." I laughed bitterly. "There is no us, Ethan. There's you and Diana, planning how to spend my father's money before his body is even cold." A flash of something crossed his face, calculation, perhaps concern. "What do you mean?" "I heard you both at Giovanni's last month. The house renovations? The summer in Europe? Making his study into a spa? Ring any bells?" He paled slightly but recovered quickly. "Grief makes people say things they don't mean. Diana is devastated. We both are." Before I could respond, my father's longtime lawyer and friend, Michael Brennan, approached us. In his 70s with shrewd eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Michael had been Harold's confidant for over 30 years. "Rachel," he said warmly, embracing me. "I'm so sorry about Harold. He was immensely proud of you, you know." Ethan excused himself awkwardly as Michael continued. "I need to speak with you privately before the will reading next week. Are you free for coffee tomorrow?" Across the room, I noticed Diana watching our interaction intently, her eyes narrowing when Michael handed me his card with a time and place written on the back. The day after the funeral, Diana went on a shopping spree at Neiman Marcus, charging thousands to my father's accounts. When questioned by the family accountant, She explained she needed appropriate attire for upcoming meetings with Harold's business associates. That same afternoon, she called the house staff together to discuss renovation plans for the property. "We'll start with the master suite," she informed the longtime housekeeper, Martha. "And Harold's study will be converted to a spa room. Ethan and I need a proper space to relax." Martha, who had served my parents for 20 years, called me immediately after the meeting, disgusted by Diana's behavior. "Your father isn't even in the ground yet, and she's measuring for new drapes." "It isn't right, Miss Rachel." I agreed, but felt powerless to stop Diana's momentum. She had already scheduled meetings with interior designers and contractors, all charged to my father's business accounts. Meanwhile, I met Michael at a quiet cafe far from my mother's usual haunts. The elderly lawyer seemed troubled, fidgeting with his coffee cup before speaking. "Rachel, there are things you should know before the official reading. Your father made some significant changes to his will 6 months ago. After he found out about Ethan and Diana, I guessed." Michael's eyebrows rose. "You knew he was aware of the situation?" I suspected. "He refused to discuss it with me, said they had an understanding." Michael nodded slowly. "Harold knew more than he let on. He hired private investigators after noticing some discrepancies in household expenses. The evidence they gathered was comprehensive. Why didn't he confront them? Why allow it to continue? Your father was a strategic thinker. He told me he wanted to see how far they would go, what their true intentions were." Michael paused. "He also discovered something about financial improprieties in Ethan's business dealings. Nothing he could prove conclusively, but enough to concern him. This new information shifted my understanding of the past months. My father, rather than being oblivious or in denial, had been gathering intelligence, perhaps planning his own form of justice." "There's something else," Michael continued, reaching into his briefcase. "Harold left this with me. He asked that I give it to you privately before the official will reading." He handed me a small leather journal, the kind my father had carried throughout his business career. Inside, in his precise handwriting, was a letter addressed to me. "Rachel," it began. "If you're reading this, I've passed on, likely sooner than the doctors predicted. I want you to know that I've been aware of Diana and Ethan's betrayal for some time. While I couldn't bring myself to confront the situation publicly for various reasons, both personal and professional, I have taken steps to ensure justice is served. Trust Michael. He is all the necessary documentation. And know that despite my inability to express it properly while living, I have always been proud of you and your integrity. You are the true heir to everything I valued. With love, Harold Mitchell." Tears blurred my vision as I read my father's words, perhaps the most emotion he had ever expressed toward me. When I looked up, Michael was watching me with compassion. "There's more in the journal," he said gently. "Financial records, dates, observations. Your father was meticulous." Flipping through the pages, I found detailed notes about unusual expenses, times Diana was supposedly at charity meetings but was actually with Ethan, and conversations my father had overheard. The final pages contained a modified asset list, with annotations about what should go where after his death. "The official reading is scheduled for next Thursday," Michael said as we parted. "Diana is expecting it to be straightforward." It won't be. The week leading up to the will reading was tense. Diana continued her spending spree, buying artwork and discussing vacation properties with Ethan. When we crossed paths at the family home, where I was collecting some personal mementos, she was almost giddy. "We should discuss how you'll vacate your apartment," she said casually. "After the will reading, Ethan and I will be consolidating our living arrangements, and your trust fund should be sufficient for a modest place of your own." I said nothing, letting her believe what she wanted. Ethan, however, seemed increasingly nervous, calling me several times with transparent attempts at reconciliation. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Rachel," he said in one voicemail. "What happened with Diana was a terrible mistake. Perhaps we could meet for coffee, talk about the future." I deleted his messages without responding. The day of the will reading arrived with appropriately somber weather, rain falling steadily outside the wood-paneled conference room at Michael's law firm. Diana arrived with Ethan, both dressed expensively in subdued colors. She raised an eyebrow at my simple black dress, a small smirk playing at her lips. Several of my father's business associates were present, along with my father's sister and her husband. Diana seated herself at the head of the table as if she were already in charge of the Mitchell estate. Ethan took the chair beside her, while I sat opposite with Michael. "Thank you all for coming," Michael began formally. "We're here for the reading of Harold Mitchell's last will and testament, revised and notarized 6 months ago." Diana's smile faltered slightly at the mention of the revision date, but she quickly recovered, reaching for Ethan's hand on the table. Michael began with standard legal preamble before reaching the distribution of assets. "To my wife, Diana Mitchell," he read, and Diana sat up straighter, her expression victorious. "I leave a monthly stipend of $5,000 to continue for a period of 5 years or until her remarriage, whichever comes first. This provision reflects my awareness and documentation of her extramarital relationship with my son-in-law, Ethan Williams, which began approximately 18 months ago." The room fell silent. Diana's face drained of color, while Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My aunt gasped audibly. Additionally, Michael continued, seemingly unaffected by the bomb he had just dropped, "Diana Mitchell is required to vacate the family home within 30 days of my death. All personal items acquired before our marriage may be retained by her. All items purchased during our marriage remain with the estate." Diana found her voice shrill with panic. "This is ridiculous. I was his wife for 40 years. This can't be legal." Michael looked at her calmly. "I assure you, Mrs. Mitchell, everything is in order. Harold consulted extensively with both myself and another legal team to ensure the will would withstand any challenge. The documentation of your infidelity is quite thorough, including private investigator reports, photographs, and financial records of expenses related to your affair." Ethan placed a restraining hand on Diana's arm as she prepared to launch into a tirade. His eyes had taken on a calculating look. "What about the rest of the estate?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. Michael turned the page. "To my daughter, Rachel Thompson, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including but not limited to all real estate holdings, business interests, investments, art collections, vehicles, and personal effects. This includes full ownership of Mitchell Development Corporation and all subsidiary companies." The room spun around me as Michael continued detailing the extent of my inheritance: over $75 million in assets, properties across 3 states, the family home, my father's extensive art collection, and complete control of his business empire. Diana stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is preposterous. He wasn't in his right mind." "I'll contest this." Michael removed his glasses calmly. "Mrs. Mitchell, contesting the will would require a public hearing where all evidence Harold gathered would become court record. This includes quite explicit surveillance footage and financial documentation showing how you and Mr. Williams planned to use Harold's money once he passed. Additionally, there are concerning records regarding Mr. Williams' business practices that could trigger regulatory investigation." Ethan's face had gone completely white. He tugged urgently at Diana's sleeve. "We should consult with our attorney before saying anything further." Diana whirled on him, fury distorting her carefully maintained features. "This is your fault. If you hadn't been so obvious, so greedy." "My fault," Ethan hissed. "You were the one who insisted on shopping sprees before he was even buried. You were the one talking about renovation plans in front of the staff." Their unified front crumbled as they turned on each other, revealing the true nature of their relationship, a union built on greed and opportunity rather than love. I sat watching them implode, feeling a strange sense of calm. My father, in his final act, had delivered justice more effectively than I ever could have. As Diana and Ethan stormed out, still bickering bitterly, Michael leaned toward me. "There's one more thing Harold wanted you to know," he said quietly. He had the private investigators follow them for months. They documented everything, including conversations where they specifically discussed waiting for his death to access his money. He knew exactly who they were and what they wanted. Why didn't he confront them? Why live his final months knowing this betrayal was happening under his roof? Michael smiled slightly. He said he wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves. And he wanted you to have incontrovertible proof of their true characters, so you would never doubt yourself or your worth again. As the others filed out of the conference room, I remained seated, overwhelmed by the day's revelations. My father, emotionally distant in life, had found a way to protect me after his death. In his own way, he had shown his love when it mattered most. The immediate aftermath of the will reading was chaos. Diana refused to accept the terms, engaging an aggressive attorney who specialized in contesting wills. Her legal team sent threatening letters and demands for mediation, all of which Michael handled with unflappable calm. "They have no case," he assured me over lunch at a quiet restaurant near his office. Harold anticipated every possible challenge. He had 3 separate psychiatric evaluations in the months before changing his will, all confirming his sound mental state. The documentation of Diana and Ethan's affair is extensive and would be deeply embarrassing if made public. They're bluffing. Indeed, when Michael's team responded with a sampling of the evidence my father had gathered, including time-stamped photos of Diana and Ethan entering hotels together, transcripts of their conversations about Harold's money, and financial records showing Ethan had been skimming from my accounts during our marriage, the legal threats abruptly ceased. Diana was forced to vacate the family home, a process she made as difficult as possible. She attempted to take artwork and antiques that belonged to the estate, necessitating an inventory team to monitor the moving process. She left water running in upstairs bathrooms, causing minor flooding, and accidentally broke a cherished sculpture my father had commissioned on their 20th anniversary. "It's just stuff," I told Martha, the housekeeper, as we surveyed the damage. "The important thing is she's gone." Ethan's downfall came swiftly after the will reading. Based on information in my father's journal, Michael alerted financial regulators to questionable practices at Ethan's firm. An investigation revealed he had been mismanaging client funds and falsifying returns. Within weeks, his license was suspended pending a full investigation, and his most prominent clients had withdrawn their accounts. Meanwhile, I found myself the sudden head of a business empire I had deliberately avoided my entire working life. Mitchell Development Corporation employed over 200 people and had projects across the Northeast. Despite having carved my own path in real estate, I knew nothing about running a large development company. "Your father anticipated your concerns," Michael said during one of our regular meetings. "He left detailed instructions and suggested a transition team to help you learn the business. But he was also clear that if you choose to sell the company, that would be your prerogative." I decided to take 6 months to learn the business before making any permanent decisions. To my surprise, I found I had an aptitude for development that complemented my experience in real estate sales. My father's executive team, initially skeptical of the boss's daughter taking charge, came to respect my insight and fresh perspective. One afternoon, about a month after the will reading, I was reviewing project proposals in my father's study, now my study, when Martha announced an unexpected visitor. "Mr. Williams is here to see you, Miss Rebecca." I told him you were busy, but he's quite insistent. My heart raced at the mention of Ethan's name, but I kept my voice steady. "Send him in, Martha. And stay within earshot, please." Ethan entered the study looking markedly different from the confident financial advisor I had married. His designer suit had been replaced by casual clothes that showed signs of wear. His typically perfect hair was longer, less manicured, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Rebecca," he began, his voice soft with practiced humility. Thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Ethan? I remained seated behind the desk, putting a barrier between us. He paced the room nervously, eyeing the valuable art pieces my father had collected. I wanted to apologize. What happened between Diana and me, it was a terrible mistake. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to end. Interesting timing for this epiphany, I observed coolly. Right after you discovered there's no money coming from Diana. He flinched but pressed on. It's not about the money. Diana and it's over. She's become erratic, blaming me for everything. I've had time to reflect on what I threw away. Our marriage, your trust. Where are you staying now? I asked, changing the subject abruptly. The question seemed to throw him. I had to sell the condo. With the investigation and legal fees. I'm renting a studio apartment in Somerville. And your clients? He looked down. Gone. All of them. My reputation in the financial world is destroyed. So you thought you'd try to win back the wealthy widow, I concluded. A convenient solution to your problems. It's not like that, he protested, but without conviction. I still care about you, Rebecca. We could start over. People make mistakes. Forgiveness is... Stop. I stood, my patience exhausted. You didn't make a mistake, Ethan. You made a series of calculated decisions to betray me with my own mother. You planned to profit from my father's death. You stole from our joint accounts during our marriage. These aren't mistakes. They're revelations of character. He stepped toward me, desperation in his eyes. Please, Rachel. I have nothing left. No job, no prospects. I'm facing possible criminal charges. I need my help. I finished for him. My money? My connections to make this all go away. He didn't deny it, which was perhaps the most honest he'd been since entering the room. I walked to the study door and opened it. Goodbye, Ethan. Don't contact me again. You can't just throw away 5 years of marriage. His composed facade cracked, revealing the anger beneath. I have rights. I could still contest the divorce settlement, claim part of your inheritance. I smiled for the first time. You could try. But then Michael would have to release the financial audit showing you embezzled from our joint accounts. And the regulators would receive the complete documentation my father gathered about your business practices. Is that really a path you want to pursue? His shoulders slumped in defeat. As he walked past me toward the door, he paused for one final attempt. You know Diana was the instigator. She pursued me. She planned everything. And yet you were a willing participant. You both showed me exactly who you are. Now I believe you. After Ethan left, I poured myself a glass of my father's favorite scotch and sat in his leather chair, feeling a strange mixture of closure and new beginning. The confrontation had confirmed what I already knew. Ethan had never loved me, only what I could provide for him. The revelation should have hurt, but instead it felt like the final severing of an unhealthy attachment. Diana's attempt at reconciliation came a week later, though with considerably less humility than Ethan's. She arrived at the house without warning, dressed immaculately as always, but with a brittleness to her poise that hadn't been there before. I've come to discuss a more reasonable arrangement, she announced, brushing past Martha into the foyer. This stipend is insulting after 40 years of marriage. I'm entitled to half of everything Harold built. I met her in the living room, keeping my distance. The will is quite clear, Mother. And given the evidence Father gathered, you're fortunate to have received anything at all. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of anger that spread across her face. I made your father who he was. I gave him social connections, arranged the dinner parties where he met his most important investors. I played the perfect corporate wife while he built his precious company. And then you betrayed him with my husband, I replied calmly. I'd say that negates any claim to loyalty payments. Diana's strategy shifted quickly, her expression softening into practiced maternal concern. Rebecca, darling, we're still family. Despite everything, I'm still your mother. This rift between us, it's not what Harold would have wanted. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. Actually, it's exactly what he wanted. He made that very clear in his will and private journals. Journals? Her interest sharpened visibly. What journals? Father kept detailed records of your affair with Ethan, including your conversations about spending his money after his death. He knew everything, Mother. Diana sank onto the sofa, her composure faltering momentarily before she rallied. We all make mistakes, Rebecca. I'm willing to take responsibility for mine. Perhaps we could come to a private arrangement, something more befitting my position. The scandal would reflect poorly on the Mitchell name if this became public. The scandal of my mother sleeping with my husband, or the scandal of her being cut out of my father's will because of it? I asked pointedly. Either way, I'm not interested in private arrangements. The will stands as written. She stood abruptly, mask of reasonableness discarded. You ungrateful girl. I gave you life. I raised you in privilege and comfort. And this is how you repay maternal love? By leaving me to survive on a pittance while you hoard millions. Maternal love? I echoed incredulously. Is that what you call criticizing everything I've ever done? Undermining my confidence? Seducing my husband? If that's maternal love, I think I'm better off without it. Diana gathered her designer purse, chin lifted in defiance. This isn't over, Rachel. Family is forever, whether you like it or not. You'll come to regret this vindictiveness. As she walked out the door, I felt no regret, only relief. Both Ethan and Diana had shown their true selves one final time, confirming that cutting them from my life was not only justified, but necessary for my healing. That evening, I continued sorting through my father's papers, discovering notes for development projects he hadn't had time to initiate and philanthropic ideas he'd been considering. In a locked drawer of his desk, I found a small velvet box containing my grandmother's sapphire ring, a family heirloom Diana had claimed was lost years ago. A note in my father's handwriting accompanied it. Rachel, Diana borrowed this from my safe deposit box without permission. I recovered it from the jeweler where she was having it appraised for sale. It belongs to you now, as my mother would have wanted. I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling a connection to the grandfather I barely remembered and the father I was only now coming to understand. In death, Harold Mitchell had revealed more of himself than he ever had in life. Through his journals, his careful planning, and his final act of justice, he had shown me a depth of love and protection I hadn't known he felt. The empire he left me was more than buildings and bank accounts. It was a second chance to build a life on my own terms, free from the people who had sought to undermine and use me. As I sat in his study, now truly mine, I began to envision not just how to preserve what he had built, but how to transform it into something that reflected my own values and vision. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately set me free. Exactly 1 week after Diana's dramatic exit from my life, Ethan began his campaign to worm his way back into my good graces. It started with daily phone calls, which I sent straight to voicemail. Then came the text messages, alternating between apologies and thinly veiled references to his dire financial situation. When these went unanswered, he escalated to sending elaborate flower arrangements to both my office and home. Another delivery for you, Miss Rachel, Martha announced, carrying in a massive bouquet of red roses. Same message as yesterday. I glanced at the card without taking it. Please give me a chance to explain. I miss you, Ethan. Donate them to the Children's Hospital again, I instructed, turning back to the business proposal I was reviewing. My father's company was considering a major development in an underserved neighborhood, transforming abandoned industrial buildings into affordable housing while preserving the historical architecture. It was exactly the kind of project I wanted Mitchell Development to be known for, profitable but purposeful. Martha hesitated before leaving. Mr. Williams also left a voicemail on the house phone. He mentioned something about the financial regulators offering a settlement if he could make restitution to his clients. I understood immediately. Ethan needed money to avoid criminal charges, and he thought I might provide it to preserve the Mitchell name from scandal. His transparent manipulation was almost impressive in its audacity. Meanwhile, Diana was facing her own reckoning. Without access to my father's fortune, she was forced to adjust to a dramatically different lifestyle. The $5,000 monthly stipend, while generous by normal standards, couldn't sustain her previous level of extravagance. She had to sell her designer wardrobe and jewelry to maintain appearances in her newly rented condominium. Boston society, which had once revolved around her, quickly recalibrated. Invitations to exclusive events dwindled. Former friends became suddenly busy when she called. The women who had once envied her wealth and position now whispered about her affair with her son-in-law and subsequent fall from grace. I heard about these developments not because I was keeping tabs on Diana, but because Boston's elite suddenly found me much more interesting as the new head of Mitchell Development. Charity boards that had previously denied me membership now courted my participation. Social invitations flooded my inbox. Old family connections who had sided with Diana after the scandal now claimed they had always known something wasn't right about that woman. I accepted some invitations and declined others, careful to align myself only with people and causes I genuinely respected. This selectivity only increased my social capital, creating a virtuous cycle that established me as a power player in my own right, not just as Harold Mitchell's daughter. 3 weeks after the will reading, I was working late at the office when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Ethan Williams is here, Ms. Mitchell. He doesn't have an appointment, but he insists it's urgent." I considered having security escort him out, but decided it was time to end his persistent attempts at contact once and for all. "Send him in, Katie. And stay near the door, please." Ethan entered looking more disheveled than during his visit to the house. His designer watch was conspicuously absent, and his shoes needed polishing. The desperation in his eyes had intensified. "Rachel, thank you for seeing me." He remained standing, shifting his weight nervously. "I've been trying to reach you." "I'm aware," I replied coolly. The flowers, calls, texts, and emails made that clear. "What do you want, Ethan?" He launched into a clearly rehearsed speech about regret, forgiveness, and second chances. As he spoke, I noticed how his gaze kept darting around my office, lingering on the valuable art pieces my father had collected. Even now, he was assessing potential assets. "I've made terrible mistakes," he concluded, "but the man you married is still here, beneath all the poor choices. We could start fresh, rebuild what we had." I let silence fill the room for a moment before responding. "Are you finished?" He blinked, thrown off script. Yes, I suppose I am." "Good. Because I have something to say." I stood and walked around my desk to face him directly. "I want to thank you, Ethan." "Thank me?" Confusion replaced his practiced contrition. "Yes, you and Diana did me an enormous favor by showing your true characters so completely. You freed me from a marriage to a man who never loved me, only what I could provide. You revealed my mother's lifelong jealousy and manipulation for what it was. In betraying me, you both gave me the gift of clarity." His expression hardened. "So that's it? Years of marriage and you won't even consider?" "There's nothing to consider," I interrupted. "Our marriage was a fraud from the beginning. You pursued me for my family connections and potential inheritance. The only difference now is that I'm no longer blind to that fact. You can't just dismiss me," he snapped, his charming facade cracking. "I was your husband. I have rights. The prenup doesn't cover inheritance received after separation. Any decent lawyer would." "Let me stop you there," I said calmly. "Michael has already consulted with the top divorce attorneys in Massachusetts. The evidence my father gathered about your affair with Diana, combined with documentation of your embezzlement from our joint accounts, nullifies any claim you might make. Pursuing this legally would only result in criminal charges against you." Ethan's face flushed with anger. "You think you've won, don't you? Sitting in Daddy's chair, playing businesswoman. You'll fail without me." You always needed my confidence, my social connections. You're nothing but an insecure girl playing dress-up in your father's world." I smiled, genuinely amused by his assessment. That's who I was when you met me, Ethan. Insecure, seeking validation, easy to manipulate. But people change. I'm not that woman anymore, thanks largely to you and Diana showing me exactly what I don't want in my life. I pressed the intercom on my desk. "Katie, please have security escort Mr. Williams out. And update our building access list. He's no longer permitted entry to any Mitchell properties." As security arrived, Ethan made one last desperate attempt. "Rachel, please. The regulators are threatening criminal charges. I could go to prison. I just need enough to make restitution to my clients. A loan, that's all. I'll pay it back, I swear." "Goodbye, Ethan," I said simply, turning back to my work as he was led away, still protesting. That confrontation proved to be a turning point. With both Diana and Ethan definitively removed from my life, I could focus fully on building something new from what my father had left me. Mitchell Development Corporation underwent a transformation under my leadership. We maintained the profitable commercial projects that had been my father's bread and butter, but expanded into mixed-use developments that incorporated affordable housing, community spaces, and environmental sustainability. I established the Harold Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to educational opportunities for underprivileged students interested in business and real estate. The Foundation's first initiative was a scholarship program that provided full university tuition and mentorship to 10 students annually. During this period of professional growth, I also focused on personal healing. I began therapy with Dr. Simmons, a compassionate but no-nonsense psychologist who helped me process the betrayal and rebuild my sense of self-worth. I joined a support group for divorced women where I found understanding and eventually friendship among people who had experienced similar pain. One of these women, Kristen, introduced me to her brother James, an architect whose firm sometimes competed for the same projects as Mitchell Development. Our first meeting was contentious, a heated debate about historical preservation versus modern functionality. But his passion for thoughtful design and community impact resonated with my evolving vision for the company. We began collaborating professionally, then meeting occasionally for coffee to discuss industry trends, and eventually for dinners that had nothing to do with business. 6 months after the will reading, Diana made one final attempt to re-establish contact. She appeared at the Foundation's inaugural gala, somehow obtaining a ticket despite not being on the guest list. As I was speaking with potential donors, she approached in a borrowed designer dress, champagne glass in hand. "Darling, what a lovely event," she said loudly enough for those around us to hear. "Your father would be so proud of how you're carrying on his legacy." The donors exchanged uncomfortable glances, aware of the scandal but too polite to acknowledge it. I excused myself and guided Diana to a quiet corner. "What are you doing here, Mother?" She sipped her champagne, eyes calculating. "Is it so strange that I want to support my daughter's charitable work? We're still family, Rachel, despite our difficulties." "This isn't about family," I replied evenly. "You want public rehabilitation. Being seen at this event, reconnecting with me publicly, it's your attempt to regain social standing." Her smile faltered slightly. "Can't it be both?" "Yes, I've made mistakes. Terrible ones. But I'm still your mother. Blood is thicker than water, as they say. Actually, the full proverb is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means chosen relationships are stronger than biological ones." I took her champagne glass gently but firmly. "Please leave, Diana. This foundation represents everything my father valued: integrity, generosity, vision for the future. You've demonstrated none of those qualities." For a moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across her face. "You really hate me, don't you?" "I don't hate you," I said truthfully. "That would require emotional investment I'm no longer willing to make. I simply don't want you in my life." Security escorted her out discreetly, and I returned to my guests, the brief interaction already fading from importance. Diana left Boston shortly afterward, relocating to Florida where she had a cousin. I heard occasionally about her attempts to integrate into Palm Beach society, with limited success. She never contacted me again. On the anniversary of my father's death, I visited his grave alone, bringing white roses, his favorite. As I stood there, I realized how much had changed in a single year. The pain of betrayal had transformed into something unexpected, gratitude for the freedom to become fully myself, unburdened by others' expectations or manipulations. That evening, I returned to what was now truly my home. In the study where my father had spent so many hours building his empire, I opened a letter he had left with Michael, to be delivered to me on this day. "Rachel," it began, "if you're reading this, a year has passed since my death. I hope the pain has eased, and you've begun to see the opportunity in what initially felt like devastation. I was never good at expressing emotions, a failing I regret deeply now. But please know that watching you navigate this betrayal with dignity and strength confirmed what I've always believed: you are the true heir to everything that matters. Buildings can be constructed and businesses can grow, but character is revealed in our darkest moments. Diana and Ethan showed theirs, as did you. I'm sorry I won't be there to see what you build with what I've left you, but I have complete faith it will surpass anything I accomplished. Not because of the Mitchell name or money, but because of who you are. My only advice: build something that matters to you. And perhaps learn from my mistake. Don't wait until it's too late to tell people you love them. With pride and love, your father." I folded the letter carefully, touched by words he had never spoken in life. On my desk lay blueprints for Mitchell Development's most ambitious project yet, a mixed-use development that would transform a neglected waterfront area into a vibrant community space with affordable housing, small business incubators, and environmental innovations. We were breaking ground next month. Beside the blueprints was a framed photo taken at last week's foundation event, showing me surrounded by the first cohort of scholarship recipients. And next to that, a handwritten note from James, asking if I was free for dinner on Saturday. The revenge my father had orchestrated had given me justice, but the life I was building now was giving me something far more valuable: purpose, joy, and the freedom to define success on my own terms. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead revealed my strength, and for that, I could almost be grateful to Diana and Ethan. Almost. True wealth, I had learned, was never about money or status. It was about integrity, meaningful work, and the courage to begin again after loss. In inheriting my father's fortune, I had found something far more valuable: myself. Have you ever experienced betrayal that ultimately set you free? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of resilience and reinvention resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes our greatest pain can lead to our most authentic path. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.